As he tried to push this country over the edge and into violent revolution and dictatorship in November and December of 2020 and January of 2021, Donald Trump was not responding to what he falsely believed was a stolen election, and he was not responding to faulty legal advice from faulty lawyers, and he was not responding to changing partial vote counts, and he was not responding to unexpected outcomes in swing states. It was all a plan, an 8-year-old plan, a well-rehearsed 8-year-old plan. Jack Smith has now filed a motion indicating he will prosecute Trump for January 6th, at least in part, on the premise that all that Trump did in late 2020 and early 2021 was not some sort of organic response to an election that he seriously thought was or could have been stolen from him. It was just a play from his playbook, one that he had been rehearsing and refining and repeating since November of 2012, one that he had run in November of 2020 in Detroit, one that he had run repeatedly during the 2016 campaign when he said it was rigged against him and he would not confirm he would accept the results, one that he had first stitched together inside his diseased mind and enacted only as just another celebrity nut job on Twitter after the election of 2012. Smith has also submitted specific evidence about an unindicted co-conspirator and witness that the rest of us don't know about, a co-conspirator tied directly into that Trump rehearsal for January 6th, part of the coup plot that most of us had forgotten about, the Stop the Count near riot during vote counting at the TCF Center in Detroit on November 4th, 2020. Those details in a moment. But first, let's go through the mind-bending reality that Trump's bid to overthrow the duly elected government of the United States on January 6, 2021, actually began on November 6, 2012. Smith, in the filing, underscores that reality in his submission to Judge Chutkan. It is at the heart of the copious evidence that Trump is a serial, recidivist election denier, starting with his remarkable chain of tweets from election night 2012, some of which Trump deleted, more he did not. Remember, 11 years ago, Dementia J. Trump was politically seen as Scott Adams or Kevin Sorbo, a crackpot with some name recognition. So few noticed after Barack Obama's re-election victory over Mitt Romney when Trump tweeted, quote, "The phony electoral college made a laughingstock out of our nation. The loser won." Few noticed when he tweeted, "The election is a total sham and a travesty. We are not a democracy." Few noticed when he tweeted, "Our country is now in serious and unprecedented trouble like never before." And few noticed when he tweeted, "The Electoral College is a disaster for democracy." And those are the milder tweets, the background. There are 4 more, which I have included in my commentaries as long ago as during the 2016 campaign, but which presented in this light, in the continuity of insurrection and anti-America violence that is now 11 years old, that startled even me to read them again. Trump's 2020 coup attempt was so non-spontaneous, so non-unrehearsed, non-organic, that those last 4 tweets bemoaning Obama's re-election even used the same language that would become all too familiar to the rest of us 8 years and 2 months later. Quote, "He lost the popular vote by a lot. We should have a revolution in this country." And if you missed his point there, quote, "More votes equals a loss. Revolution." Quote, "We can't let this happen. We should march on Washington and stop this travesty. Our nation is totally divided." Unquote. And then, most chillingly of all, words he repeated almost exactly as he sent his minions into the Capitol to actually try to destroy democracy on January 6, 2021, from November 2012, quote, "Let's fight like hell." Let's fight like hell. The Capitol riot began inside Trump Tower 11 years and 1 month ago as an impotent old fat man named Donald Trump railed against the president who had once humiliated him at a White House Correspondents' Dinner. And it is in the genius of Jack Smith and his team, Molly Gaston appears to have written this new filing to Chutkan, that we see the otherwise invisible thread. All of Trump's defenses. I was just doing what a president should do when he believes an election has been compromised. I was just listening to the advice given me by my lawyers. I was just responding to unfolding events. All of that was bullshit. All of it, in fact, was backfill bullshit. All of it was gaslighting bullshit. The nightmare of 2021 began in Donald Trump's mind and on his phone in 2012. And now there is a new conspirator. The Michigan Stop the Count riot? The what now? I know. I completely memory hold that one myself. Smith filed an outline of new evidence with Judge Chutkan yesterday, submitted because it is not charged in the indictment that it was an as yet unidentified Trump campaign employee participating as a count observer who tried to arrange a riot at the main Michigan counting facility, that as soon as the Trumpists saw that the count was trending towards Biden, he texted a Trump lawyer and, quote, encouraged rioting and other methods of obstruction, unquote. This was at the same time Trump was tweeting a terrible thing was happening in Michigan. And suddenly, social media was flooded with calls for volunteers to go to the TCF Center in Detroit. Smith's filing reads that Trump's agent was, quote, seeking to cause a riot to disrupt the count. Nearly happened, too, in what looked like a bad stage revival of the Brooks Brothers riot in Florida during Bush-Gore in 2000. A whole lot of pasty white guys showed up and filled the rotunda of the conference center, and they started chanting, "Stop the count," and banging on the windows that separated them from, the actual volunteers, the mostly black Michigan election workers. Happily, bureaucracy came to the rescue. Building management basically locked the rioters out, called the cops, and within 3 hours, the place was cleared of Trumpist operatives who we now know were there to start a riot. Sound familiar? But most importantly, Smith's evidence that this was directly manipulated by one of Trump's, quote, agents is new. It is as new as Trump's plots to convince others to believe all presidential elections are crooked is not new. Of course, those Trump tweets also testified to the validity of a point I made yesterday. Speaking of nightmares, we are, again, at the political equivalent of the moment in the movie Rosemary's Baby, when Mia Farrow shakes off the drugs and the anesthetics and the gaslighting and shouts, "This is no dream, this is really happening." I know there was some blowback to my proposal yesterday that President Biden could still invoke the Insurrection Act today, detain Trump and the rest of the 2020 coup conspiracy, and the 2025 conspiracy, and the 2016 conspiracy, and then, having safely put them away, terminate the Insurrection Act like 95 minutes later. Because if you are like me and you like democracy, the idea of going beyond it to save it seems inconsistent, messy, also QAnon-ish. Even if Abraham Lincoln did do nothing but stuff like that for 4 years without interruption. On the other hand, even I did not expect the Speaker of the House of Representatives to follow up on the day of my modest proposal by publicly announcing he would obstruct justice and release the remainder of the January 6th video so the fascists could build their own phony narrative But first, he would blur the faces of insurrectionists who tried to overtake the Capitol during the Electoral College certification. Blur their faces so that, and he said this, the Department of Justice could not use the unreleased video to prosecute them. He actually said that. And I will get to Mike Johnson, who not only announced he will commit the crime of obstruction and hire more people to also commit the crime of obstruction, but reminded us in so doing of his own role in the Trump coup attempt. I'll get to him in a moment. But first, I also did not expect that the day I suggested using the Insurrection Act now against Trump, rather than leaving it in place so that Trump can get the chance to use it against America, I really did not expect that no less than 4 of the people who I would detain were it my call would come out publicly the same day and more or less confirm my thesis. My thesis is as follows. This is going to happen in America. It is going to happen in the next 2 years. People are going to be detained. Political opponents are going to be prosecuted. The Insurrection Act is going to be invoked. The only questions are these nauseating and mostly unprecedented events going to occur in defense of democracy, or are they going to be used to destroy democracy? Are we going to detain, or are we going to be detained? There's going to be a big fight with rocks. Right now, we own all the rocks. Are we going to use them? Or are we going to say, we are too noble to use these rocks? So even though we would use them judiciously and with a minimum amount of rocks, we'll just leave them here so that later the psychopathic fascists can use them. Kash Patel went on Steve Bannon's Hitler cast. And yes, Steve Bannon explains Kash Patel would probably be CIA director under Trump.
Do you feel confident that you will be able to deliver the goods, that we can have serious prosecutions and accountability? And I want the Morning Joe producers that watch us and all the producers that watch us, this is just not rhetoric. We're absolutely dead serious. We're not. You cannot have a constitutional republic and allow what these deep staters have done to the country. The deep state, the administrative state, the fourth branch of government never mentioned in the Constitution, is going to be taken apart brick by brick. And the people that did these evil deeds will be held accountable and prosecuted, criminal prosecutions. Kash, I know you're probably going to be head of the CIA. But do you believe that you can deliver the goods on this in a pretty short order the first couple of months so we can get rolling on prosecutions?
Yes, we got the bench for it, Bannon, and you know those guys. I'm not going to go out there and say their names right now so the radical left-wing media can terrorize them. But, excuse me, the one thing we learned in the Trump administration the first go-around is we got to put in all-America patriots top to bottom. And we got them for law enforcement. We got them for intel collection. We got them for offensive operations. We got them for DOD, CIA, everywhere. And the one thing we will do that they never will do is we will follow the facts and the law and go to courts of law and correct these justices and lawyers who have been prosecuting these cases based on politics and actually issuing them as lawfare. We will go out and find the conspirators, not just in government, but in the media. Yes, we're going to come after the people in the media who lied about American citizens, who helped Joe Biden rig presidential elections. We're going to come after you. Whether it's criminally or civilly, we'll figure that out. But yeah, we're putting you all on notice.
Any questions? You want to leave the Insurrection Act to those two psychopaths? Jailing reporters? Suing the ones they choose not to jail? Specifically prosecuting the staff of Morning Joe? And no, as much as I want to, I won't even make the joke about how appealing that sounds. We have to keep Joe Scarborough safe from the fascists, who he happily mainstreamed in 2015 and 16. Whatever the reason, the likeliest is this is not philosophy, nor Kash Patel and Steve Bannon's preferred form of government. This is just two losers' chances to rule the world. These madmen morons like Patel and Bannon intend to destroy this country using the tools built into our system, which we could first use to stop them. They intend, they promise, you just heard them promise to shut down the free press. They intend, they promise, you just heard them promise to prosecute anybody who had the nerve to say Donald Trump had the nerve to break the law. Dragging anybody from the Department of Justice or the Democratic Party into stacked courtrooms, and in so doing, not even having to say to the judges, go along with us, or you will be the next ones prosecuted, because that message will have already been conveyed. See, the reason people compare Bannon and Patel to Nazis is this corruption of the justice system upon which their ecstatic delusions of grandeur rest. It is the same corruption of the justice system upon which Hitler's dictatorship was built. Once you have all the courts, you can not only do anything, but you can have what seems to be an outside authority declare it legal. The other component is, of course, institutionalized gaslighting, and that's where the other developments are coming that pertain to my modest proposal. I mentioned yesterday that over the weekend, Trump had directed his primary weapon, the accused must accuse the accuser. He had directed it against the growing awareness within the Biden administration and the Biden campaign that highlighting the genuine Trumpian threat to representative government and democracy must be an essential component in their campaign. Now it is Trump claiming, they even made up signs claiming Biden is destroying democracy. But yesterday they took the next step. It was the hapless Byron York of the Washington Examiner who gave away more than he could possibly understand when he suggested that because the Atlantic and the New York Times and the Washington Post and some other places all wrote pieces about Trump's menace on the same day, that must be some kind of coordinated plot. It was then the moronic but still dangerous Matt Gaetz who took it to the next step after that and said, sure, it's a plot. It's a plot to stochastically encourage violence against Trump. And Gaetz said this on the Sebastian Gorka show. Sebastian Gorka, who on the night of Trump's inauguration in 2017 wore an actual badge, an actual tunic, and an actual ring linked to Hungarian Nazi sympathizers. I don't know where we get the nerve to say they're Nazis.
All they're saying is Donald Trump, Nazi, 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 fascism, dictatorship. It looks like that is their campaign platform for 2024.
I think it's even worse. I think that they are green-lighting assassination. Yeah. You know, when you hear people talk about Trump as Hitler or as some sort of authoritarian tyrant, they're trying to justify violence against him and violence against his supporters. And it is sickening and un-American. I condemn it in the strongest possible terms.
Leaving aside the absurdity of accusing anybody of green-lighting assassination against Trump, when Trump green-lights assassination against a dozen judges and prosecutors and critics before he falls out of bed in the morning, Gaetz does not seem to know that one of the articles he's claiming is part of this plot against Trump, the one from the Washington Post with the clever image of Trump's mask being torn away to reveal a Roman emperor, looks like a cross between Julius Caesar and Vespasian. The article titled, "A Trump Dictatorship is Increasingly Inevitable, We Should Stop Pretending." That one that's part of the plot against Trump. Trump went on Truth Social and posted a link to it, just in case anybody missed it, because after all, the title, "A Trump Dictatorship is Increasingly Inevitable," is to Trump a bigger compliment than, "No, your hair looks great." By the way, Sebastian Gorka's show, it's on Salem Radio. Salem, NBC's partner on the Republican debate that had aired last month, co-moderated by Hugh Hewitt of Salem and Kristen Welker. Well, Kristen Welker, congratulations. 2 degrees of Sebastian Gorka. You're Nazi adjacent. Oh, and by the way, thank God CNN is under new non-Chris Licht paste-eating management. They will only be hosting 2 Republican presidential town halls next week. Live ones. An hour live of Ron DeSantis live next Tuesday live, and then an hour live of Vivek Ramaswamy live a week from tonight live. But don't worry, they have Abby Phillip there to push back the Ramaswamy tsunami of lies with her bare hands and that sincere look in her eyes. Tonight on CNN, a live hour with the devil. Charles Barkley and Gayle King hosts. Back to the point. Just didn't see the Republicans doubling down on the January 6th was a normal tourist visit bullshit either. Same day as my modest proposal, and no, I know it was a coincidence. Still, this from Speaker Mike Johnson about releasing the January 6th video that shows nothing was a shock. Of course, it would have been more of a shock if Mike Johnson hadn't been Trump's leading agent inside the coup attempts in the House.
House Republicans trust the American people to draw their own conclusions. They should not be dictated by some narrative and accept that as fact. So they can review the tapes themselves. We're going through a methodical process of releasing them as quickly as we can. As you know, we have to blur some of the faces of persons who participated in the events of that day because we don't want them to be retaliated against and to be charged by the DOJ.
See, that's obstruction of justice. Moreover, Johnson is proudly announcing he's committing obstruction of justice. Now, to some degree, it's less serious and more performative than that. I mean, the FBI has all that video. On the other hand, nearly all of the actual prosecutions of the January 6th revolutionaries were prompted by, well, crowdsourcing. So blurring the faces might reduce our leading criminal investigation of January 6th by your neighbors and the folks down at the VFW. Also, as Adam Kinzinger asked, Mike, I thought you said the violent ones were all Antifa and Black Lives Matter. And I'll add an FBI plants and probably Hunter Biden. Blur the faces, Mike. While you're at it, probably a good idea if you get all the images of yourself from January 6th and you blur that face too. Oh, and all the images from January 6th of Trump. Because he's guilty as sin. And if our tradition of defending democracy by handling it only with archival quality white linen gloves, except for Mr. Lincoln's presidency, of course, if that has to be replaced for a little time with soiled work gloves, so be it. Donald Trump, to circle back to the new Jack Smith filing, Donald Trump, professional election denier, established 2012. Donald Trump has to be imprisoned before he can destroy what's left of this nation. And I say this calmly and with no call for violence, but I no longer really care too much about exactly how we put him there. Also of interest here, Mike Johnson is not just a Trump tool, he's a Russian tool. And so, on the same topic, Ukraine, just when I thought he might not be as much of an ass clown as I'd always thought he was, so is Mitt Romney. Plus, an admission from a Republican congressman they want to impeach Biden, so Trump can say, see, Biden was impeached too, I'm not the only one. And I think I know what's going on with the Shohei Ohtani stuff. Not which team he's going to play for next year, but which teams he's not going to play for. That's next. This is Countdown.
This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
Postscripts to the news. Some headlines, some updates, some snark, some predictions. Dateline Capitol Hill Speaker Johnson, the smarmy little worm, has okayed a vote on a Biden impeachment inquiry. Apparently the first article will be his son bought a Ford truck. The thing is such a joke that Congressman Troy Nehls of Texas, owned and operated by Trump, has given up even pretending. He has explained this charade to USA Today on the record. Impeaching Biden would give Trump, quoting Nehls now, a little bit of ammo to fire back, unquote. In other words, so he can say Biden was impeached too, because the entire country sits at the whim of a mentally imbalanced, rapidly deteriorating would-be dictator. And at the whim of Congressman Jamie Comer, who is not imbalanced and is not deteriorating because he's got nothing to deteriorate from. He's just a yokel.
Congressman, are we supposed to believe that?
I mean, they think everyone's ignorant. They assume that the majority of Americans at the end of the day are going to be financially illiterate.
Chairman Gomer, the phrase you were going for there was financially illiterate. Only you said financially literate because you are completely illiterate. Dateline Kyiv, President Zelensky of Ukraine canceled a Zoom call scheduled yesterday with senators in advance of the make-or-break vote on aid to that country. Speaker Johnson, Russian stooge, wrote back to the White House Office of Management and Budget that aid to Ukraine is, quote, dependent upon enactment of transformative change to our nation's border security laws. He was promptly slammed for that by Senate Majority Leader McConnell, but not by Senator Mitt Romney, who used to be an American, but is now just another Putin puppet, holding Ukraine hostage and stating, quote, Dems want $106 billion, GOP wants a closed border, that's the trade, but clueless Dems want to negotiate the border bill, not going to happen. Is an open border more important to Dems than Ukraine and Israel, unquote. I always laugh when Mitt Romney talks about the border with Mexico. Mitt Romney's father was born in Mexico. He was born there because his family had fled there because they were polygamists and the locals here in the U.S. of A. wanted to kill them. The only reason they ever returned to this country from the Romney family compound in Mexico was that the Mexican government had become so unstable that the Romneys had to flee for political asylum across the Mexican border. Punchline, Mitt Romney is only here because my grandfathers did not turn their back on the plight of Mitt's grandfather. And Dateline, South Carolina, Washington's conservative paper, The Examiner, reports that Congresswoman Nancy, I skipped morning sex to come to this prayer breakfast, Mace, has lost 3 senior staffers, all of them Trump practice dictatorship alumni, 3 staffers in the past week alone. Wow. She's misplaced them? To lose 1 is unfortunate. To lose 3 looks like carelessness. The paper reports Mace fired her chief of staff, then the deputy chief of staff quit. Now the legislative director is leaving at the end of the month. My sympathies, Congresswoman Mace. I suppose this makes it much, much harder to get out of bed in the morning.
This is Sports Center. Wait, check that. Not anymore. This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
In sports, Dateline Nashville, Tennessee. Shohei Ohtani has signed an autograph. Sorry. Some very strange things are happening in the saga of the baseball free agent pitcher and DH who, had he not needed Tommy John surgery on his pitching arm, might have gotten a free agent salary of $100 million a year and been worth every penny of it. Early on, Ohtani's camp indicated it would hold it against any team that leaked that it had met with him. Yet here we go. First, there was the story that he met Monday with the Toronto Blue Jays at their camp at Dunedin, Florida. And I love Toronto, and the Jays people are great, but you were trying to impress Shohei Ohtani? So you met him at Dunedin, Florida, at your training camp, a facility that has been painted like once since 1977? Then, even weirder, yesterday, Los Angeles Dodgers manager Dave Roberts at the baseball winter meetings publicly stated on the record that he had met with Ohtani in the last few days. His bosses refused to make any comment on what their own manager said on the record. There are also a couple of reports out of the Bay Area that the Giants also met with Ohtani. There's a vague story about negotiations with the Chicago Cubs, too. But remember, He's holding it against any team that reveals they have met with him, wants this secret until he decides, which would mean the Jays, the Dodgers, the Giants, the Cubs, they're all out of the bidding, which would mean they all forgot about that rule, which would mean they're morons. See, here's what I think is happening, and for all I know, he could have signed with the Dodgers between when I recorded this and now when you are hearing it. I think the Jays and the Dodgers and the Giants and the Cubs know he is not going to sign with them. So each of them leaked that they met with him so that their fans will get excited that he might sign with them, and when he doesn't, their fans will get mad at him, not at the club. The New York Mets, of course, did it perfectly. The Mets pretty much said they were not interested in Ohtani, and now Mets fans are even madder than usual at their management. Same thing for the Mariners, the Red Sox, and the Rangers. The Rangers, who may be world champions but don't have a TV contract and thus don't have any money. Seems kind of logical that Ohtani, who is a low-key guy who wants total control of his life and how much publicity he does or does not get every single day, who has already adjusted to an American community once and doesn't seem like he wants to go through that again, seems like he's going to stay where he's been. The Los Angeles Angels. By the way, those Los Angeles, California Angels of Anaheim, Azusa, and Cucamonga, in what might be related news, they also say they are not trading Mike Trout. And Dateline Tallahassee. Florida State's football team was left out of the college football playoff, and they're all ticked about it. That's the college football playoff, which was supposed to end people getting riled up about this version of professional football. In any event, Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida says his state will contribute $1 million for any litigation expenses involved in suing to, get Florida State into the playoffs. Your tax dollars in action. Now, if you're wondering why DeSantis would do anything this dumb, please note, this is the first time in at least a week that there is a story coming out of the Florida government that is not about elevator shoes or 3 ways with Moms for Liberty. Thank you, Nancy Faust. Still ahead of us on Countdown, I've been thinking a lot lately about Ted Turner. And about the day I wanted to sock him, and he wanted to sock me, and he wanted to fire me. And a later day when I got a fan letter about a story I did about Ted from, well, you won't believe who the fan letter was from. Coming up in Things I Promise Not to Tell. First, time for the daily roundup of the miscreants, morons, and Dunning-Kruger effect specimens who constitute today's worst persons in the world. The bronze, worse, Julie Kelly. One of these Trump suckers from the ironically named American Greatness Organization. She writes in the structure of journalism, but without the facts, the ethics, or the knowledge. Kelly clipped something from a Tanya Chutkan ruling on a Trump motion, which read, quote, "The court must take the allegations in the indictment as true," unquote. Kelly captioned this, "Can someone explain innocent until proven guilty to this foreign-born judge?" Apart from the casual racism and the white supremacism, several lawyers pointed out that the giant hole in Julie Kelly's inferior education includes one really big problem related to this. Let me quote Brad Heath. Trump had filed a motion to dismiss the entire January 6th case, so as Heath writes, when deciding a motion to dismiss, a federal judge is required to accept the allegations in the indictment as true, regardless of the judge's place of birth. Julie Kelly, by the way, is a graduate of Eastern Illinois University, and they have my condolences Her bio also notes she's a frequent guest on Tucker Carlson Tonight. Not anymore, she ain't, meat. The runners-up, worser, Congressman Thomas Massie. Now, he's got a track record a mile long. Conspiracy theorist, Q-adjacent, racist, insurrectionist. But even so, it was kind of startling to see his social media post using the Drake red ski jacket meme with the label Congress these days, and Drake holding up his hand and making a sour face towards the words American patriotism, and then smiling towards the words Zionism. If I were trying to prove in court that Congressman Massie is an anti-Semite, that would be exhibit number 1. But our winner, the worst, Ronna McDaniel, Republican National Committee chair, and look, I want that party to be run by the dumbest people possible. I really do. But even in that context, I do not know how she keeps her job. I mentioned in the A block the latest Trump the accused must accuse the accuser twist, accusing Biden of trying to kill democracy. They actually sent Ronna out to give an example of this on Fox News, and she screwed it up completely. Because the problem is, Ronna McDaniel is a Romney, therefore she's a freaking idiot. Quote, "This is a Biden White House that was meeting with social media companies dictating what they put on their platforms before the 2020 election. This is a White House that killed the Hunter Biden story that we now know is true, that prevented voters from knowing that before the 2020 election." Oh, for Christ's sake already. Madam, leaving the Hunter Biden story being true part, because it ain't, you do know who the president was in 2020, right? Any guesses? No, it was not Joe Biden. It was your boss. Ronna, you just accused Trump and his White House of killing your Hunter Biden story. You also revealed you can't count. Ronna Romney McDaniel, higher number of names than IQ points. Today's worst person in the world, including Mitch Romney. To the number 1 story on the countdown, and my favorite topic, me and things I promised not to tell. And before the 40th anniversary of this event recedes into the forgotten past, I have one more story to tell you about covering the 1982 National Football League players' strike. And this is less about the strike itself and more about the man for whom I covered it, Ted Turner. Ted Turner had put CNN on the air just 2 years earlier, and his sports guy, Bill McPhail, had interviewed me for a job as their New York sports reporter even earlier than that, May of 1980. And when I did not get it, I was genuinely relieved because I was convinced there was no way they would ever get CNN on the air. No chance. Ever. Obviously, I did not account for Ted Turner's stubbornness. Anyway, I wound up going there freelance in 1981, as I have related in some detail here, when Lou Dobbs and his girlfriend, the New York sports reporter, had to get out of town fast at the insistence of Mrs. Lou Dobbs. 8 months later, as the 1982 NFL strike loomed, they had made me staff and given me a contract, first offering me $1,000 less a year than they were paying me freelance. Even CNN of 1982 acknowledged the absurdity of that mathematical proposition. So I was a vested, already whining about Ted Turner employee of CNN when the football players walked out on strike in September 1982. And that strike was my beat every day from March to November. A day or so after the strike began, we set up an interview with the president of CBS Sports, Neil Pilson, about the effect that the strike would have on TV sports in general and CBS Sports in particular. And as the camera crew and I filed into his office, Pilson wearily said, "Nothing against you guys, but I've done so many interviews already about this strike that if you actually come up with a question I haven't been asked already, I'll give you..." Well, we all leaned in towards him. "Give us what? A job? A job interview at least? $50? I'll give you CBS Sports caps." Nah, not exactly a job, but better than nothing. So we rolled tape, and I said, "So, Mr. Pilson, in light of the strike, do you wish CBS Sports did not have the Super Bowl this year as it does?" And he laughed, and he took off his mic, and he went over to his office phone, and he buzzed his assistant. "Bring in 3 caps, will you?" And he sat back down, and he said, "You guys did it. Nobody asked me that yet, and it's like the only question that really interests me. You still rolling? Neil Pilson then proceeded to give a lengthy and thoughtful answer about how, as long as the season was not canceled, it was probably better to have the next Super Bowl because people would be so grateful that after the strike they wound up playing it anyway. So now a week goes by after that interview, and the bargaining sessions between the players and the owners are taking place in a Manhattan hotel, the Lowe's on Lexington Avenue, a dump with a nice lobby. All that matters to me is the Lowe's with the dump and the nice lobby is literally 3 blocks from my apartment. The players and the owners just march through a long hallway into private rooms. That's all we see of them. It is not heavy lifting. There are nice seats, at least in that lobby. But it is enlivened one day by news that our boss, Ted Turner, has asked the union if he can come in and meet with their 20-odd player negotiating team because he wants to pitch them on something. He was, in fact, due there yesterday, but was unavoidably detained. The rumor the players told me, never confirmed, was that while changing planes in Chicago, Turner and an air hostess had ensconced themselves in a dumpster, or the other version was in a janitor's closet, for 12 hours of whoopee. And that's why he was a day late. Anyway, I walk into the Lowe's that morning, and if somehow I had not been able to recognize my camera crew, sure enough, it is the same 2 guys who had been with me at Neil Pilson's office at CBS when I asked him the question he had not been asked before, earning us free CBS sports caps. And the cameraman and the deck operator are, of course, wearing their CBS sports caps. And understand, in 1982, CNN was not an upstart. It was not the feisty outsider. It was not the future of news. We were called Pretend TV. It was said that CNN stood for Chicken Noodle News. One day, I called somebody up and asked for press credentials for Cable News Network, and the guy said, "Cable News Network? Are you the people who own the newsstands downtown?" I had no idea what he was talking about, so I went to one of the newsstands and I asked the guy, "Who owns this place?" And he pointed to a plaque and it said, "Owned by Cabell News Company." The Cabell News Company, owner of downtown newsstands, was better known than Cable News Network. We got scoffed at. In some arenas and venues like Madison Square Garden in New York, our crews were not admitted because they were not in the union. So the CBS sports caps were an important, albeit borrowed, touch of legitimacy and dignity, especially for my cameraman and my deck guy. So the 3 of us position ourselves in that long hall in the lobby, waiting for my boss, Ted Turner, me holding the mic with the big red CNN logo on the mic flag, and the crew wearing their gaudy CBS sports caps. And in Ted walks, emerging from the brilliant early autumn sunshine, filtering in from behind him from the street like this was a perfectly lit movie scene. And he sees me and recognizes me and smiles and comes over and beams, "Hot damn, it's my CNN crew." And he shakes my hand, and we roll tape, and I start to ask him my first question, and suddenly the joy drains from his face. And he stops me. "Hold it. What they wearing on their heads?" He gestures at the cameraman and the deck guy, and I explain the backstory. "I don't give a damn who gave them. This is CNN crew. They wearing CBS sports caps. Get them off their damn heads." And he pushes me. I mean, really shoves me and strides past us. Now, even then, I'm 5'6" inches taller than Ted Turner and 25 pounds heavier at least. And maybe I can live with my employer embarrassing me in public, but I do not have to let him shove me in front of all the other reporters. So for a second, I think, I'm just going to run down the hall and catch him and horse collar the bastard from behind. About a year into my TV career, I have already accepted that there are positives to television, but I've also already learned nearly all the negatives, and not 3 months earlier, I had gone over to ABC to interview with them about going back to do radio sports. Seems to me, given what I know about Ted Turner, dragging him to the ground and then quitting TV forever would be a pretty appropriate farewell. And then one word popped into my head. Rent. Oh, right, rent. So quickly I go to plan B. To be fair, in thought, if not in action, Ted Turner was right. Looked pretty silly to have the CNN camera crew wearing CBS sports caps while interviewing the founder and owner of CNN, who, by the way, was in the newspaper constantly because he kept saying he was going to buy CBS. Plus, I still had a story to do that day, and that crew was going to have to go back into the room where Turner would be meeting with the players about an hour later for the proverbial spray shot that would give us some video to use of their meeting. And simply having my guys take their caps off was not going to suffice. So I ran the 3 blocks back to my apartment to grab the only bit of merch or swag produced in the first 2 years of CNN, something they had an apparently inexhaustible supply of. CNN bumper stickers. I must have had 100 of them in my place alone, and there were boxes and cartons and boxes and cartons of them in the New York bureau, which was plenty enough as it was, since I don't think all the people who worked at CNN in New York in 1982 owned 6 cars among them. Anyway, I trimmed a couple of the stickers down to just the CNN logos and raced back to the crappy Lowe's hotel, and just as they were calling for the crews to come in to get the spray shots of Ted meeting with the players, I put those CNN logo stickers over the CBS logos on my guys' caps, and to my delight, they stuck in place. Little large, but it worked. Minutes later, the boys came out of the meeting room, and the cameraman was in hysterics. He wound the video back and had me watch it through the viewfinder of the camera. As soon as they had walked in, Turner started to give them dirty looks, and then suddenly one of the NFL players said, "Hey, Ted, there's your crew. There's your CNN crew. Hey, CNN, over here." Everybody was laughing, and now Ted was beaming. "That's them. That's my CNN crew, all right. Good work, boys." When his meeting with the players broke up an hour later, I got a message from Ted's assistant to wait for him around a corner from the main lobby so he could give CNN, exclusive details about what he was trying to sell the players on. It was a series of exhibition games, so the striking players could make a little money on the side that he could televise, and there would be a pitch to the National Labor Relations Board that the strike had been forced on the players by the owners, which would have meant the players would have all become free agents. Ted wanted them, all of them, every player in the National Football League, to sign instead with him. He would create a 24-team league. He would give the union half ownership of every team. He would find backers for the other half, and all he wanted was the TV rights. It didn't happen, obviously, but what a breathtaking scheme. Anyway, Turner was all smiles when he came out of the meeting to tell me, before he met with the rest of the press, and he said, "Great with the hats, good work. Gonna have to get you guys some real CNN sports hats for Christmas." Ted stayed another 15 or 20 minutes doing God knows what with God knows whom. I didn't see any dumpsters in the hotel. And then he left by the main exit as the rest of the camera crews and reporters trailed him. I went along just to see if there was anything he hadn't told me, and as he went out the doors to his car, he said, "See you, Olbermann." And I said, "Don't forget the hats." And Ted Turner gave me one of the dirtiest looks I have ever gotten in my life. Sure enough, a couple days before Christmas, I get a call from my boss in Atlanta. "We just got a box of 100 CNN Sports Truckers caps from Ted Turner's office. I don't know what the hell this is all about, but his assistant says if we wanted to know, we should call you." I was very proud of making the correct choice between correcting a mistake and getting us all hats and assaulting him. There is one postscript. Ted talked the players into the exhibition games I mentioned, only 2 of them, one at RFK Stadium in Washington, which I went to on assignment, seated next to Ted Turner. He had 2 flasks with him. Anyway, the crowd was so small at RFK Stadium in Washington that at one point they got on the PA system and asked all the fans to go sit down behind the player benches so the TV shots of the game wouldn't show all those empty seats. The other game was in the Los Angeles Coliseum. They drew even less. Maybe 1,000 fans, probably more like 500. 500 fans in the LA Coliseum. 500 fans looks like the raisins in rice pudding. But it was the name of his ad hoc league with these games in Washington and L.A. that still sticks with me 40 years later. Ted named it himself. I'm pretty sure he did this deliberately. I know nobody else noticed it until I made a big deal about it. Ted Turner called his ill-fated venture, his ersatz National Football League, the, quote, all-star season. And I said, perfect. The acronym you have built for it is ASS. I've done all the damage I can do here. Thank you for listening. Countdown has come to you from the Vin Scully Studios at the Olbermann Broadcasting Empire World Headquarters in New York. Someday I will read you the fan letter I got when I did a story about Ted Turner and going into the Broadcasting Hall of Fame or something on ESPN2, like 2014 or so. Countdown musical directors Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel arranged, produced, and performed most of our music. Mr. Chanel handled the orchestration and keyboards. Mr. Ray was on the guitars, the bass, and the drums, produced by TKO Brothers. See, it was who the letter was from that makes it particularly interesting. And it was like, keep up the great work, and then it had this big signature at the bottom, and it was, Other music, including, you'd never believe who sent it. Other music, including some of the Beethoven compositions, arranged and performed by the group No Horns Allowed. The sports music is courtesy of ESPN Inc. and was written by Mitch Warren Davis. It's called the Olbermann theme from ESPN2. Speaking of the fan letter about the Ted Turner thing, I was on ESPN2 when I did this long commentary about it. He's in the Broadcasting Hall of Fame. He should have been in there already. He should be going in twice. And the guy wrote me a fan letter saying I was exactly right. Quoted the whole thing about he should have 2 awards. Our satirical and pithy music, you never believe who sent it. Our satirical and pithy musical comments are by Nancy Faust, the best baseball stadium organist ever. Our announcer today was my friend Howard Feynman, and everything else was pretty much my fault. So that's Countdown for this, the 1065th day. I'm so excited about telling you who the letter was from that I screwed that up. The 1065th day since the guy who wrote me the fan letter about Ted Turner, Dementia J. Trump, made his first attempted coup against the democratically elected government of the United States. Use the Insurrection Act against him now while we still can. I'll even contribute my letter to the display when we keep him in that naval brig somewhere for the rest of his life. The next scheduled countdown is tomorrow. Bulletins as the news warrants. Till then, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night. Yes, Trump wrote me a fan letter. And good luck.